Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting duel edition. Not that we're having a duel, as I said the last time I did one of these. It's not Hamilton. Not going to do a duel that way, but I have two guests on this episode of Words, Images, and Worlds, and that is author, creator Bianca Alu-Marr and artist creator Steve Peters. Thank you both for jumping in
Hi.
and joining. Hi.
Mhm.
Hi.
Thanks
You
for having
have
us.
Oh, well, glad to have you. Glad to have you. You've created and worked in this world of Awakening Comics and Comicverse. And so curious to hear about your collaborative process, curious to hear about the kind of books that you share and that you're drawn to. And I believe by means of a first question, I was going to ask about this Awakening Comics title, moniker, and sort of how it came to be.
Okay, I'll take that one. So Awakening Comics started in '97 after I got a grant from the Xeric Foundation. I don't know if you're familiar, but
I've heard of.
if they're not, I think it still exists, but they're not doing comics anymore. But it was well known for a while for giving grants to comic artists, and it was started by Peter Laird of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a way to give back to the community that did so much for the Ninja Turtles that made them superstars. And so I got the grant, and then I started publishing the following year in '97, and the name Awakening Comics is from my favorite song from my favorite band, which is Yes. And yeah, so that's it. I started publishing in '97 and still publishing today. Uh, I started out with the self-titled Awakening Comics series, and then I did some comics about a character called Sparky, who's half angel, half devil. And in 2011, we started the Comicverse. Uh, Bianca and I had worked together a few years before on another project that didn't really get off the ground. But the Comicverse really had wings. So I think that leads to our next question. And I think Bianca can take that one.
And that one is collaborative process. So, curious about the way that you work together and how you go about a project.
Yeah, our previous project that didn't get off the ground and this one both started with like a kernel of an idea that Steve had. With the comic verse a while back, we actually met at an open mic. I was doing reading poetry and he was doing music and also helping with sound at this open mic. We became friends. And back then I said, I love Eastern Dragons. I have this idea for a comic with one in it. And he said, well, I don't really know how to draw dragons, and he wasn't that interested. But then fast forward to when we started working on it, he said there's this local comic book shop called Brave New Worlds, which I was familiar with. It's in our area. And, you know, I want to do a comic strip that appears in their weekly newsletter and maybe some other comic book shops' weekly newsletter as well. And I've also figured out how to draw a dragon. And
Nice.
so it kind of started there. And um, he at the time Steve wanted it to be kind of like a Garfield comic where it had, it was short and it had kind of a joke at the end, like a laugh in it. And for me, I'm more of like a short story writer. And so I started making it expanding the world a little bit. That's what I was really interested in. Um, and it really took off where it started to become its own world. It started off with, our characters just in a comic book shop, kind of like, having short interaction and a joke. And then I wanted to develop those characters more and more. I really liked them.
Hmm.
But the way it works is Steve might say, okay, I have this idea for, the station that they live on is attacked. And, they have to get out of the station. And then I take that idea and I write from that idea. And then we kind of check in with each other about the plot as I go along. So we might, kind of outline it together, and then I work from that outline. Or sometimes he even just says, why don't you write about two characters on a date? And I just go with it. And so I write in screenwriting format. I took a number of screenwriting classes, and so that's the format I write in, and then I send it to Steve, and he works from that script.
Nice, nice. Now, Steve, you were adjusting a figure back there behind you. Is that a dragon over your shoulder that I see? Is that right?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought so. Yeah,
That's him. And
love it.
actually, one of our readers made it for us. She calls them stuffies.
That's Ying.
Nice. Very nice. Great interaction with the reader as well. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it sounds like the comic verse has given you some really interesting avenues to explore, and I know that humor is part of it as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. Curious about the ingredients. What would you say the ingredients are for kind of a positive collaboration?
Well, I think our friendship really works well. Like we get along really well. And you know, I'm okay with Steve having these kind of outlines or kernels of ideas because I love collaborating in general. Like it's really exciting to me, that he can have this like basis for an idea and I can help it grow and add to it and put my own like flavor on it. And then, the first time that with that other project he was talking about that never got off the ground, it was the first time I had ever worked with a comic book artist. And I was just like blown away. I was so floored by what he can do artistically with what I write.
Mhm.
That's so exciting to me just to see what I write come alive in art. And so, yeah, to me, it's just like a no-brainer. It's very exciting to do, and we've been doing it for a long time. It works out really well.
Nice, nice. Well, we had a little bit of the origin of the comic verse there, but anything else that you'd like to share about the kind of work that you like to do in comic verse?
So it's really cool because number one, it's in outer space.
Mhm.
And both Steve and I like love sci-fi. I can't even say like I love sci-fi. And so you can have aliens, you can have technology that you're creating, all kinds of things like that. So many different species and aliens and creatures can come and live and interact with them on the station. But then you can have that more like human element of romance, of friendships. And that's something that I really like to do is I like to write from that perspective, from a very close perspective with my characters and kind of build out from there. And then you have world building, you have comics, you have like there's so many possibilities to work with kind of the framework of the comic verse.
Yeah, yeah. You were talking about doing sort of the screenwriting format there. Um, Steve, what's the process for you like from getting that script? Any particular approaches that you like to take?
Um, mm, Not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, she does hand it to me in script form,
Hmm.
and she doesn't break it down into pages or panels or anything. Like, it's up to me to do that. So, I usually like to um make it so that a scene will be an even number of pages, so either 2 pages or 4 pages or and so on. Um, because I don't like to have a scene end on the left side and then a new scene on the right side. I'd like the whole scene to be on the spread of pages.
Hmm.
So um, again, I have to work with what she sends me in script form, and sometimes if it's too short, I'll be, can you add a couple lines so that we can make this fit better into 2 pages or 4 pages or however many. Um, yeah, was there another part to that question?
Yeah. Do you, so I'm just curious if you use kind of like traditional methods, if you're more of a digital creator, or if you blend the two.
Well, it depends on the comic I'm working on. First we have the comic verse, like the main title, which is really story driven and character driven. Um, that one I draw traditionally, and then I
Hmm.
scan them in and do all the tones and all that stuff on computer. Now we have a spin-off called Subspace Chatter, Comic Verse Subspace Chatter. And in that one, the characters do a podcast. I'd like to call it Spacecast.
Uh-huh.
And that one is all done digitally. Now, I drew all the characters. You know, I have a I have a file that's like all faces of, like, say, Yang the dragon,
Hmm.
all his different expressions, and then another file that's all his body, and then I'll just like paste them together in Photoshop. Sort of like how South Park is done. With
Hmm.
the cut paper. It's the similar kind of process. So they were drawn, way back, but they're all assembled digitally. So I guess it's kind of a hybrid. Um, so depending on the project, I'll work digitally or more traditionally. And Subspace Chatter, we have a Kickstarter running right now until July 11th. It's it collects all three issues so far, and then we have 48 pages of new material, and we redrew some of the material from issue one, because in issue two we came up with the idea of having artist friends illustrate um, the episodes that we're talking about. So we'll do like an episode of Deep Space Nine. We did crossover, and so we had our friends draw. We'll talk about a certain scene, so we had a friend draw the scene to go with the discussion. And then we continue doing that in issue three. So for this collection, in issue one, I had been using just like photos from the episodes, like actual photos of the actors. And so to make the whole thing consistent in the new book, we went back and I redrew. We did Strange Tales issue 110, and I redrew all the scenes that we refer to. I redrew Steve DeCoe's drawings, um, and then we had our artist friends do a couple of the other episodes as well. So there's a lot of new material in the new collection that the Kickstarter ends July 11th.
Nice, nice. It sounds like it would be fun to do a comic that sort of sends up some of the aspects of podcasting too.
It kind of does that. It's a little step beyond, because in a lot of the episodes we have some cosmic event happening that causes the events of the episode that they're discussing to happen to Ying the dragon in real life. So
Mm-hmm.
we did like I said, we did Deep Space Nine crossover. So Ying ends up finding himself in the mirror universe with a mirror version of Ray, his adopted brother, who has like a Spock goatee.
Nice. Love the intertextuality. Love the references.
And
Thank
then
you.
we have a brand new for the new book. We have a brand new review of the parallels from Next Generation, and that's the episode in which Worf keeps slipping from one alternate reality to another one.
Hmm.
So again, we had the same thing happen to Ying, where he keeps shifting from one comic verse reality to another one. So we
Nice.
like to have fun. It's like not just a podcast. It's podcast plus, because a lot of these things happen to him after they do the episode.
The metaphysical repercussions of a podcast. I love it. I love it. It makes me wonder if the things that I'm talking about on here are like happening somewhere out there. Uh, well, I know that we can go to the Kickstarter and I'll get the link from you so I can make sure to share it. But other spaces where people can go if they want to learn about Awakening Comics, the Comicverse, or any projects that you're working on?
Well, if you go to, it's long because I don't have a domain name, but I have awakeningcomics.wordpress.com /home. That's where I announce anything new that's going on.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we have the Comicverse blog, which is the comicverse.wordpress.com. And we post a new page every week at the blog, if all goes well. If it's going really well, I'll post 2 or 3 pages in a week.
Fantastic. Well, anything that we've missed in the talk through that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
I would say just that, if people love, comics, sci-fi, humor, romance, and just, adventure, then I feel like our comic would have any of those elements and discussions about they actually get material from 1,000 years in the past from Earth. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what they're reviewing that material on the podcast. So also like relevant topics, like when the first Wonder Woman movie was, there was a women's only showing of it, and people got all upset about that. And so we can talk about kind of modern events as well. So yeah, I think it has a lot for everyone to check out.
Yeah, it's set 1,000 years in the future, and then the device that we came up with is that some people from their time went back in time in order to be able to recover, because the idea is like a lot of this is forgotten 1,000 years from now. Like people will surely remember Superman.
Mm-hmm.
He's like mythological, like Gilgamesh, at this point. But a lot of the little things, and individual issues of comics and stuff will probably be lost 1,000 years from now. But with this device, we have these archaeologists going back to our present time and sending it to the future, and they're just rediscovering it in the comic versus time. So that's our explanation of why in the podcast they're talking about current comics and sci-fi and all that stuff.
Love the
If that
creativity.
makes
Love
sense.
that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about Bianca, that move from screenwriting to comics writing, because I know that there are some things you can do for movies and television that you can't do for comics and vice versa. So just curious what that sort of process is like for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it's very similar. Like the way I was taught to do screenwriting is to be number one, very brief in the action descriptions. Because if you're not a famous director, then you're not going to be the creative director or the main director as the writer. And so you're just like, Ying walks into a bar,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you can see on screen is happening. And for the most part, Steve is able to draw most of the things that I write. So there's really no limits, so there might be some things where he's like, oh, that's difficult, or that would take too many pages. But for the most part, if I think it up, he can draw it. And so I use the same format that I did for screenwriting. I guess the only difference would probably be that in screenwriting, you're supposed to also add lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do indicate, is it daytime or nighttime? So that kind of gives an idea sometimes of lighting. But yeah, so I can leave out some of the things that you do for television and movies in the sense that you don't need to know like lighting or angles or anything like that. But it's pretty similar.
Thank you both for the time, the creating, and glad to have you back anytime.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having us.
A pleasure. A pleasure. Thanks so much.